Daf Ches. Viba Yisema. What is that? It's 11 lines down, I think. Schus of our learning. Should have to be some English immediately. Like Hashem, that we're able to learn. Okay, so we're discussing why we needed the word Aleha to tell me that a prohibited marriage would not be allowed just because it's mitzvah, just because it's the mitzvah of Yibam. We would know that anyway. So we came up with one answer, and that answer was from Ula, which said Hayel b'ishtri ishtri. Once you have a heter, you sort of like you're hetered in, and then we would have allowed the other isser as well, because there's a heter, there's a exception where you're allowed to marry your sister-in-law, your brother's wife. So we'd say if that's the case, then you're also allowed to marry the other sister-in-law. I would have thought that. So it comes along a lot that tells me that you're not. Okay. Only problem was that heter would have only worked if the brother wasn't married and the thing. We said, yeah, you're right. It will work in that case, in that one case. Okay. Iba Yisema. Another teretz. Asya be'akesha mid Rabbi Yoina. We'll learn it from the comparison that Rabbi Yoina gives us. Damar Rabbi Yoina, v'itemer Rav Huna Breder Rabbi Yeshua. It's either Rabbi Yoina or Rav Huna Breder Rabbi Yeshua. Amar Kra, the pasuk says, I think it says this by the Sunida, but it's at the end of the Arayas. It says that whoever will do from all of these disgusting things, they'll be cut off. The Gemara actually says, based on this, that Hukshu Kol Arayas, before we get to Hukshu Kol Arayas Kol Neshesach, the Gemara says that it compares all the Arayas one to another. Now, what is considered a forbidden relation? What is considered a relation? So the Gemara says that relation is ha'ara. That means, it's actually a machlekes, what it means. But it's what sort of relations, what is the act of relation? Like how much has to be performed to violate relations? How much, if it's just the head of the male organ enters in, that would be already considered relations. Ha'ara, it's called. And that's all the arayas are the same in that aspect. However, what we're doing here is hukshu kol arayas kun leishesach. We're comparing everyone to eishesach. Ma eishesach shayaf kol arayas kulan nami shayaf. Just like eishesach, which means the sister-in-law, the wife of your brother is permissible if he passes away without children. So remember, we had a comparison, all the arayas one to another. We had a comparison regarding what? Regarding what's considered relation. Well, anyway, we had that comparison. So we'll also make a comparison that they all become permissible. So Kasav Rachmana Aleha. So the pasuk says Aleha that it's not permissible just because Eishesach is permissible. All right. It's not so pashat. Amalei Ravachim Midifti LeRavina. Ravachim Midifti says to Ravina Michti, 1 second. Let's see. Kalarayas ikalakshinu leishesach b'kalakshinu la'chaisisha. My chaz is the akshas la'chaisisha akshinu leishesach. You see, we didn't define exactly what we were dealing with before. Eishesach, I know, is mutter. Eishesach is the brother's wife, and the brother passes away. I know that the brother can marry that woman. That's Yibam. I also know that a person's wife's sister is forbidden for him to marry while his wife is alive. And if that sister is married to his brother and he passes away, I know that that's usher because of Aleha. Aleha tells me that he can't marry that sister-in-law, through the wife's sister. But what about Kala Rayas Kulan? So I know that there's a comparison. All other relatives, there's a comparison. But which way do you go? Do you take him to Eishasach, that it's all mutter? Do you take him to Achaisisha, where it's aser? So how do you know which way to go? I know I have two, I have a permissible and a prohibited. And then I have kol arayos kulon. Do you want to go this way? You want to go that way? Which I know that they're compared, but I have two options. So, yeah, what was the Rabbi Yaina doing? He was telling me that it would have been mutter. What would have been mutter? Everyone would have been mutter. Comes along Aleha, it tells me, but where does it say Aleha? It says it by a chais ishte, by his wife's sister, but it doesn't tell me about everyone else. So we have to answer up this issue. It goes like this: Iba yasema lekula v'chumra makshina. Yeah, this is the modern from approach. That if you have two options, to be lenient or strict, you go strict. But the Gemara says it's a chumra. The Gemara talks about a chumra that the einat tzibur yechelim lamid by. If you're going to be so strict, people aren't going to be able to handle it. So they joked about today that it's a kula she'einat tzibur yechelim lamid by. People don't like kulas. Okay. So here we're saying that if you have two options, you have to go strict. So that's what we're going to say, that everyone's going to be compared to a chaysishtay, and we're not going to permit a second prohibited relation just because of Yibam. Iba Yasema, if you want, you could say, and this is probably the more obvious one, that hacha trey yisuri v'hacha trey yisuri, a trey mitrey yalfinan, aval hacha chad yisura v'trey michad alay yalfinan. We had, which way do you go? You have Eishasach, the brother's wife. It's a sister-in-law, but it's permissible when the brother passes away. You have a chaysishtay, that's the wife's sister. That's not permissible, even if the brother passes away. So, and then I have all the other arayas, the daughter and the whatever. So which way do we go? So the truth is, all of them have a prohibition of being the brother's wife. But the only thing is, there's a special heter if he passed away without children, that he can do yibam. So I have two prohibitions on all arayas. I have two prohibitions on the sister-in-law, on the wife's sister. I have one prohibition on Eishasach, which that gets allowed. So if I have to compare, I compare the two to the two rather than the two to the one. So that's why I would go lechumra. All the arayas have two. They have, first of all, it's a sister-in-law. Automatically, it's the brother's wife, means a sister-in-law. And also, it's some other relationship. It's some other relative. Okay, that's the second answer. Rava Amar, Rava comes in and tells us we got it all wrong. We were learning this for, I guess, about 7 blot. We got it all wrong. Rava says, Erva leitricha kra. We never needed a pasuk to tell me that, I know this Aleha is not talking about this. You said Aleha is telling me that a relative can't do yibam. I didn't need a pasuk for that. I never would have thought that yibam would permit, the positive command of yibam would permit all of those negative prohibitions of forbidden relations. I never would have thought that. The whole pasuk of Aleha is only telling me that if there's a second wife to the brother that passed away, one of the wives is a relative, one of them is a woman from I don't know where, whatever, not related to the brother or to his wife or whatever. So to tell me that yibam cannot be performed on the tzara, on the co-wife that's not related, that's what I need Aleha for. Yeah. Right? So the actual relative, let's set up the case. Reuven and Shimon. Reuven marries Leah, Shimon marries Rachel, and who do we say passed away? Reuven passes away. So Shimon has to do yibum, and he has to marry Leah. Well, Leah is a erva. Can't marry Leah because that's his wife's sister. It's Rachel's sister, it's Leah. However, Reuven had another wife, Sarah, and they're not related at all. So for Leah, I didn't need a leha, but for Sarah, which is the co-wife, the Sarah, so for that I need a leha to teach me. That's what Rabbi says.
I thought we learned that out from something like Litzror or something.
We learned from Litzror. Yeah, the Gemara is going to challenge everything here. Well, yeah. The Gemara says, "Ve'erva leitzarech kra." You don't need a pasuk for the erva. But Tanya, but if you go back to that brisa on Daf Gimel, it says, "Ein li elahi." I would only know that the actual relative is forbidden, which is Leah. And then it says Tzara Minai, and that's what it says. But it says Ein li elahi says I would only know from Aleha that she is forbidden. That means I needed Aleha to teach me that she herself is forbidden. Where it says Mishum Tzarasa. It says that because it wanted to go to the next case of Tzara, but really I didn't need that. I would know that she's forbidden without Allah. The Brisa continues. It says Vaktani Ainli Elahain, when it says that all the relatives as well, all the arayas are also, you can't do Yivam on them. It says Mishum Tzarasayim. Okay. That's what Rav is claiming. We'll get to the Litzrar shortly, I think. Tashima, we have a question on this. Rabbi Yomer, Rabbi says, "V'lakach v'lakcha b'yibem b'yibma lesser tzares v'arayas." Pasuk says, when brothers will be sitting together, and one of them will die. So it says, "Yevama yava yaleh v'lakcha v'lakcha le'lisha v'yibma," that the yavam, the brother, the remaining brother, will come to the wife, to the widow. He'll take her as a wife. B'yibma, and he'll do yibam. Okay. So when it says v'lakach, it doesn't say v'lakach. It says v'lakcha. I'll take her. Lakcha with the mapake. B'yibma, and he'll do yibam on her. So what is that telling me? That is lesser tzares v'arayas. But it's telling me that that it can't be a relative. You see the extra word, the extra hey rather. It didn't need to say v'yibma in v'lakcha. It's telling me that he's choosing one of two, which means that they both have to be permissible. Taking one of two. Well, you had an option there. V'lakcha, he takes her. The Yibma, and he does Yibma on her. That's telling me that if there was a relative there, that it's going to be prohibited. The problem is that V'lakcha is teaching me that the erva is also prohibited, and according to Rava, I didn't need a pasuk for that. I knew that she was prohibited anyway. Ema lesser tzares shel arayas. It's not coming to tell me that the erva is prohibited. It's coming to tell me that the tzara, the co-wife of the erva, is prohibited. As we answered before, Gemara says "Vatrei kroi kanasivla," but it says "V'lakcha" and "V'yibma." Obviously, one is for each. One is to tell me that that you can't marry the erva, the relative, if that's the wife, and also you can't marry the co-wife. It says "Loi idivid letzara." Both of those psukim are referring to one woman. Oh, I need two psukim for one woman. It says "Chad l'meisa tzara b'makam mitzvah v'chad l'mishri tzara shlei b'makam mitzvah." One is telling me that the co-wife is prohibited to this brother. In other words, in our case, we have Reuven and Shimon. Shimon can't marry Sarah. That's the co-wife. Leah couldn't marry anyway, because that's the relative. We're saying that doesn't require a pasuk. But he can't marry Sarah when it's a case of the mitzvah. But let's say it wasn't a case of the mitzvah. Let's give an example. Let's say Reuven and Shimon are not brothers. Okay. Now Reuven is married to two women. One of them is Leah. Another one is Sarah. And then Reuven passes away. So obviously Shimon can't marry two sisters. She wants to take another wife. But Sarah, what does she have to do with anything? There's no mitzvah of Yibam. She's not related to him at all. Happened to be in the past they were co-wives together. But so what? So she's not Sarah. So she's not. She's permissible. It's only b'makim mitzvah that there's an issue of a tzara. So that's what we're learning here from the two psukim. That one is that she's prohibited b'makom mitzvah. One is that she's permitted shlei b'makom mitzvah. My timer. What's the reason? Which means like, where are you getting this from? It says v'yavam. It could have said v'yavam, and instead of v'yibma, but it says v'yibma b'makom yibam hu da'asira tzara. It's only b'makom mitzvah where this co-wife would be prohibited. Shlei b'makom yibam shayat tzara. Would be permitted to marry her. Yeah, they happen to have the same husband, but so what? That's not a. It's not. He's not related to Shimon in any other way. Okay.
It's hard to understand the rationale for why is that Sarah prohibited? Like, what's the spiritual reason? Like, they're the same family or something?
You mean b'makom mitzvah? Why is it?
Yeah, b'makom mitzvah. Yeah. Like, it's an erva because they're like living together in the same household. I don't know. It's hard to understand.
Yeah. You have to think about this differently. Today you have to think about it very seriously, because there's all types of craziness in the world. You rethink everything. But why are family members prohibited to? Why is it prohibited to marry family members? I know it says it in the Torah, but why does the Torah say it? And so let's say someone consent. So I'm talking about someone wants to marry his aunt, his sister, his half sister, maybe, I don't know, whatever. All of those things. Why? What's the problem? Yeah. So the Akedas Yitzchak, he says that if brothers were allowed to marry a sister, then if there would only be one sister, the brothers would probably kill each other. They would fight, and it would be terrible, like it happened in Cain and Hevel. So therefore, he said no close relatives. Okay, now the whole world is open. So there's no this one now. I mean, you have the whole world. There's a lot of fish in the sea. So it's the Torah tells us to stop fights. So you have to think about what would happen in the case of the tzara. You know, if that's the law, whatever the case, you have to rethink what's the reason for the whole prohibition, and then you go back and you say, well, this one was a relative already. This one wasn't. What would that do to the co-wife? Yeah, it's a lot of things that we don't think about, but co-wives apparently had a lot of difficulties. Tzara, yeah, tzaras. It's the Yiddish. Okay, Amar Ravashi, Masnisin Nami Dayaka. I'll prove it to you that Rav is right. That you really don't need a pasuk for the erva itself. If you go back to the Mishnah said that there were 15 women that exempt their co-wife from doing yibam and chalitza and yibam. Now, it missed the main point. It didn't say v'ilu peturais upaichus like tani. It doesn't say that they're exempt and they cause exemption. It just said that they cause exemption for the co-wife. Why doesn't it say that they're exempt? Shema mina, that for them we don't need a pasuk. We don't need any. It's self-understood, right? Okay. Was Rav Ashi quoting the Mishnah? Was Rav Ashi quoting the Brisa? So the Mishnah said, "Paichus terasayim." So it could be the Mishnah. In the Brisa, it was the Allah and Gimel Amid Beis, right?
Did we get to the part with Rava?
Mikan Amar Chachamim, Chamish Yasir Nasrim Paichus terasayim, it's terasayim, and Achalitza. It could be either one. What did it say over here? Masnisin Nami Dayak. Masnisin sounds like it's our Mishnah that has the deal. Okay. Maishna erva delay tzarich kra. How come we didn't need a pasuk for the erva? That means the close relative that's not going to perform the levirate marriage, the yibam, why do I not need a pasuk for that? The reason was because I knew already that a positive command to do that marriage, that yibam, is not going to push off a negative prohibition that has kares. So tzara nami like tibayikra. Mishum deina say deichalesa sheish bakares. How do we know this kares on the tzara? Is that the pshat? Because we know already from litzra. No, but litzra that the tzara is a surah. I don't know what the Gemara means. Let me see. Aleha kra lidrasha dina say deichel bakares. Litzra, you're right. Yeah, because of litzra. If I have the litzra, that's only because of the aleha, right? I thought it was the aleha tells me. Oh, what we're saying here is that the litzra, even without the aleha, would tell me that a tzara is aser. Now the aleha tells me that it doesn't become mutter b'makom mitzvah. But if I know anyway that it's aser, and you told me that eina say doicha leisa say sheish bakares, and I know that all the arayas have kares, so I know that the tzara is aser. So really, why do I need aleha? That's what the Gemara is asking. Amalei Ravacha bar Bibi Mar. It's an interesting name. L'Ravina Hachi Kamar Mishmei de Rava. This is what Rava said. We're going to readjust this. It's going to be really surprising. Tzara nami la yitzrich kra. Aleha is also not necessary for the tzara. So we're really doing away with the whole last 7 blot. Ki yitzrich kra. What do I need the aleha for? Lemishrei tzara shaloi b'makom mitzvah. It's being matir the tzara, the co-wife, if there's no mitzvah of yibam. Like we said before, that if Reuben and Shimon are not related, so Shimon can marry Sarah. If they're divorced, or if he passes away, there's no yibam there. It's nothing. It's just okay. My timer. Where do you get this from? So Amakra Aleha. See, we had aleha twice. Well, it goes like this: Yevama Yava Yaleha. When do I say that you can't take the tzara? That's only when it's connected to the aleha of Yevama Yava Yaleha. When it's connected to the mitzvah of Yibam, because they were brothers, then he can't marry the co-wife that's not related to him. But if it would be not Yevama Yava Yalev, it's not a case of Yibam, then there would be no problem of the tzara. The aleha is limiting the prohibition.
I thought having tzara was asur, but Yibum was an exception. Maybe, I don't know.
No, so we're saying different. We're saying that 2 brothers,
right?
One of them has 2 wives. Okay, let's say Reuben has 2 wives, and
the other
brother is married to one of the wife's sisters. So Reuben passes away, so then he can't marry not his wife's sister, and he also can't marry the other, the tzara, the co-wife. But let's say that Reuben and Shimon are not related at all. And it happens to be that this fellow Reuven, somewhere out there, marries Shimon's sister, Shimon's wife's sister, which is Leah, and he also marries Sarah, and then he divorces Sarah.
So okay.
So
now
Shimon can marry Sarah. Yeah, there was no relation there. They happened to have shared a house with his wife's sister, but that's just like went to the same, I don't know, high school. Doesn't mean. Okay. Amalei Rami Bar Chama Rava. Rami Bar Chama says to Rava. Yeah. Rami Bar Chama happens to be interestingly related to Rava, because they both married the same woman. Yeah, they married. Well, what happened was Rava marries Rami Bar Chama's wife after he passed away. Rav Chisda's daughter. So Amalei Rami Bar Chama Rava, he says, Ema erva gufei shleiba makim mitzvah tishteri. Yeah, this is like a how do you call it, like devil's advocate. According to you, Rava, that you're making a big deal over here about saying that the pasuk of Aleha is allowing a co-wife to marry, allowing Shimon to marry his wife's sister's co-wife. Maybe it should allow him also, the pasuk should allow him to marry his wife's sister. If it's Shalei b'makom mitzvah. Because remember what did Aleha do? Well, yeah, well, if Reuven wasn't married to, if Reuven wasn't related to Shimon, Reuven and Shimon weren't brothers. Why? In other words, the whole pasuk of like V'isha lachaisa leisikach litzra tzara litzra tzara b'chaya aleha b'chaya. That whole pasuk is only aleha. It's only b'makom mitzvah. We were saying that it's only the tzara that's b'makom mitzvah. Only the co-wife b'makom mitzvah is prohibited. But maybe it's saying that the whole pasuk is only when it's b'makom mitzvah, because aleha tells me that it's a case of yibam, because Yevamos Daf, we do that comparison. So maybe erva gufei shalei b'makom mitzvah tishteri. So he asks him back, v'lav kal v'chaimeru b'makom mitzvah asira shalei b'makom mitzvah shaya. What are you saying? If when there's a mitzvah of yibam, he can't marry his wife's sister. Now you tell me when there's no mitzvah of yibam, he's allowed to marry his wife's sister. It gets worse when there's no mitzvah. It's not how it's supposed to be. If there's a mitzvah, maybe we should allow it, but we don't. But to say that it gets better when there's no mitzvah, Amalei, so he responds back. He says, "Well, 1 second. I like your logic, but what do you say with the tzara? Tzara techiach. The b'makom mitzvah asir shlei b'makom mitzvah shaya." Daniel, this could have been what you were asking. The logic is so off because the co-wife, Shimon's not allowed to marry Sarah, that co-wife of Leah, which is his wife's sister. But when is he not allowed to marry Sarah? Only if it could have been the mitzvah of Yibam. And if there's no mitzvah of Yibam, then all of a sudden it's allowed, right? So when there's no mitzvah, it's allowed. When there is a mitzvah, it's usher. Is that logical? So you see, if that's the case, then maybe even his wife's sister should be allowed when there's no mitzvah. I mean, you see, we're not running with that same. So Amalei Alecha Amar Kra b'chaya kol sheb'chaya. He responds. He says, "Litzra tzara aleha b'chaya." When is he not allowed to marry his wife's sister? When his wife is alive. So it doesn't matter. Whenever she's alive, he's never allowed. Well, mitzvah or no mitzvah, he's never allowed to marry his wife's sister. So he says, 1 second, that b'chaya is a very important b'chaya. That's teaching me other things. You can't just come in here and say that b'chaya is telling me that it's including that he can't marry his wife's sister whenever, whatever the situation is. B'chaya is telling me that he is allowed to marry his wife's sister if the wife passes away. It says, "Hahi mi v'isha elachaisa nafka." That I know from another source. It says, Isha el achaisa. A wife to her sister, you shouldn't take. But it means when the wife is around, you shouldn't take. That means while she's alive. One second. That's not necessarily going to tell me all the halachas, because if that's the case, you would think that he could divorce his wife and then marry her sister, and that's not the halacha. Really, if the wife passes away, he can marry the sister, but not if he divorces her. I need the bechaya to teach me all of those important halachas regarding marrying the wife's sister, which I wouldn't have known from the isha lachaisa, and therefore bechaya cannot be telling me that he can't marry his wife's sister if it's b'makim, if it's shlei b'makim mitzvah. Maybe if there's no mitzvah of yibum there, he should be allowed to marry his wife's sister.
Is this Rava or Chamas?
This is Rami Bar Chamas asking.
Okay, just trying to
Yeah.
make sure I'm on the right way.
Yeah. In a modern novel, they wouldn't have to say, they put it on another line, with quotations, so you can sort of follow it without.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that with the Gemara. It's all handwritten, and they just. Okay. Ella Amar Rav Huna by Tachlifa Mishmei de Rava. We have an answer in the name of Rava Treikra Iksive.
You have another 7 minutes.
I'm sorry. Oh, we have another few minutes if you want to finish. Okay, if you want to eat something. Shekayach. So, Treikra Iksive. We have two psukim. Ksiv Isha el achaisa lesikach litzrar. Ksiv legalis ervasa. What does it mean? The chada mashma. Ervasa. Only one. It sounds like it's only one. One pasuk says that a person can't marry his wife's sister, and another pasuk says, and it also is written, it's the same pasuk, right? Legala servasa, to uncover her nakedness, but it's only her. It's only one. Haketzad. How does this work? B'makim mitzvah shteyim asuris. You see, it's talking about his wife's sister and her tzara. And then it says the galis ervasa. It should be ervasan, their nakedness, because it's talking about two people. So it says, 1 second. How does this work? B'makim mitzvah shteyim asur, shlei b'makim mitzvah hi asur v'tzarasim muteres. Yeah, if it's shlei b'makim mitzvah, if it's not yibum, then only the wife's sister is prohibited, but the wife's sister's co-wife is permissible. That's what it teaches me from Legalis Ervasa. It's only one out of the two. Umar says, Eipachana. Maybe it should be the opposite. The makim mitzvah hi asura, v'tzarasa muteres, shlei b'makim mitzvah shteyim asuras. If this is your source, then we should do it like this. We should say, if there's no mitzvah, he can't marry his wife's sister, his sister-in-law, and he also can't marry her co-wife.
Her co-wife is someone who's
Married to the same husband.
Yeah.
And there's no mitzvah there.
They're not related.
Then, right? But there's no mitzvah, so because they're co-wives, it should be prohibited. But if there is a mitzvah because they were the husbands were brothers, and it's a mitzvah to do yibum, then maybe the mitzvah of yibum should allow the co-wife to be permissible. So im kain, if that's the case, la yomer aleha. This is very interesting. See, aleha has to be teaching me something. In the way that you're presenting it, it's so logical that I don't need a halal. You have to make it illogical. And then Allah is coming to tell, you have to make it logical, and then Allah is going to make it illogical. If you want to make it logical, if you want to tell me that the conclusion is that it's totally logical, then Allah is not telling me anything. So you start off logical, and Allah makes it illogical. Which leaves me with that the makkah mitzvah, if it's a mitzvah of yibam, then you can't marry the co-wife. But if there's no mitzvah there, then you can marry the co-wife. It's illogical, and that's the Allah. That's what it teaches me. Amalei Rav Ashi le Rav Kana. Rav Ashi says to Rav Kana Mimai, the Hayolel li Surah Dilmele Tera. We were saying that Aleha is telling me that you can't marry the sister-in-law, his wife's sister, or the co-wife in a case of a mitzvah. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's telling me that it is permissible. This is what the Eibishter is saying. Really, that's what it means. You can't marry his sister-in-law or the co-wife when there's no mitzvah there. But if there is aleha, that means if it is a mitzvah of yibam, shtei mutaris, then it should be mutar. You see, the pasuk was telling me. See, it's a little strange because the pasuk was telling me, you can't marry aleha, and aleha meant b'makam yibam. Now we're saying that maybe it's saying that just like, you see, Yevama Yava Yaleha is telling me a heter that he's allowed to marry his brother-in-law. Maybe what the pasuk is saying is that Yevama Yava Yaleha uses the word Aleha by the mitzvah of Yibam, and therefore it's coming to tell me that a person should not marry his sister-in-law if it's not marry his sister-in-law. But if it's aleha, that's teaching me that it's permissible. It takes me back to Yevama Yaleha to tell me that it's allowed. We were saying that it's not allowed.
But kind of a basic question. So the Yavam can marry all the co-wives of the brother who passed away?
If none of them are related, yes.
Or none of them, like you just marry them.
Yeah.
The mitzvah allows all of them.
Can he marry all of them, or can he only marry one?
Yeah.
I think he's only supposed to marry one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. I think
someone says both are permitted, just whichever one you want.
Whichever one, right?
I think from what we discussed yesterday, it's only allowed to let married one.
Right. So, yeah, the brothers, right? Lahakim, right? So Im Kain, if that's the case, legalis erva dechada hechem mishkachasla. If you're going to tell me that, if you want to eat this, 1 minute left. If you're going to tell me that it's that, but what are we going to be left with like this? We're going to end up saying that it's permissible to marry the sister-in-law, his wife's sister, and the co-wife, if it's b'makom mitzvah. That's what we would say. We're not saying that, but that's what we would say if we follow this logic over here of Rav Ashi. And if it's shlei b'makom mitzvah, then you can't marry the sister-in-law or the co-wife. So it says, "Im kain legalis erva dechada hechem mishkachasla." You told me that you can marry one but not the other. If it's in a case of mitzvah, then they're both permissible because it's yibam. So it can't work because it's going to be both or nothing. And we need that it should be a case where it's one and not the other, because we said legalis ervasa. What would that case be? That shalei b'makom mitzvah, he can marry the co-wife, but he can't marry his sister-in-law. Okay. I think we're done with the aleha discussion. Took us till the end of Daf Ches. Started on Daf Yomi to discuss what I would have thought if it wouldn't have said aleha. All of that was what I would have thought. I don't remember anything where we had one sugya that I couldn't jump in the middle of 7 pages. It's not 7, it's 6. Yeah.
Wow.
I usually can jump in the middle. Here you couldn't jump in. It's very hard to jump in the middle. You have to start from the. It's a very long sugya. Okay.
Here, it's hard even if you start from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, you're right. Gufa. We return to a statement that we had before. Now, there's a little bit of a problem with the term Gufa because Gufa is usually used when we quote Amirayim, not when we quote Tanaim. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has any notes or anything on that. Okay, Rebbe Yomer v'lakach v'lakcha v'yivim v'yivim lesser tzares v'arayas. Those words come to prohibit the yibum being performed on a relative, if the wife is a relative, or her co-wife. The Gemara says, "Midi tzares ksivi hacha." Does it say tzares? Does it say co-wives? What does the pasuk say? It says, "Ki yeshvu achim yachdav umeis echad mehem yivama yava yaleh v'lakcha elisha v'yivma." Doesn't say over here litzra or tzara. It doesn't say any of that. Where do you get the co-wives? And also, I know where it says co-wives. It says it somewhere else. I know that from the pasuk of a person shouldn't marry his wife's sister. Over there it says litzra. So the Gemara says litzra mapikla Rebbe lekad Reb Shimon. Litzra Rebbe uses to teach me something else. Comes to teach me what Reb Shimon says. Shimon Rashi goes through this. It's a Gemara later on. Very interesting case. If you have 3 brothers, 2 of them are married to sisters, and one of them is not. Anyway, it turns out that those 2 brothers that were married to 2 sisters both pass away. And now the 3rd brother needs to do, so it's Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Reuven and Shimon pass away. Reuven's married to Leah. Shimon's married to Rachel. And Levi is a bachelor or whatever. So now he has a mitzvah to do Yibam. However, he can't do Yibam because if he does Yibam on Rachel, let's say, then he's marrying his brother's wife. But the problem is that the other brother, he passed away. Everything looks good. Only problem is that there's 2 Zika. Zika is not the virus. Zika is the attachment that there is from him to these wives that he's supposed to be marrying. Problem is, it's called Achais Zikukasai. It's the sister of the wife of the other wife that he's supposed to marry, and he can't marry 2 sisters. So even though he's not marrying both of them, but both of them still have some sort of attachment to him because he's supposed to marry them, and so that creates a prohibition, and he can't do Yibam on either.
Is that one of the 2? Is that Rivka or Leah? Right?
Well, it's Rachel and Leah are married to Reuven and Shimon. So if he does Yibam on Leah, let's say, that would be a problem because he's marrying a sister of a woman that he's supposed to marry.
So what about the other?
And if he marries Rachel, then he's marrying a sister of a woman that he's supposed to marry because both brothers passed away. That's called the Chesed Kukase. So Reb Shimon says that he can't do Yibam, but you still have to do Chalitza. Yeah, you still have to do Chalitza because it's not really the sister of the wife, it's just a Zakuka. So Rebbe uses the word Sarah to teach me that. Now the Gemara says, but Sarah, it says Hacha, it's supposed to be Hecha. Hecha Ksiva, but where does it say in the Pasuk that you can't do Yibam on the Sarah, according to Rebbe? It says Hachi Kamar. Imkein lemakra v'lakach. My v'lakcha. What does it mean? He takes her, v'lakcha with the mapik, v'lakcha. He takes her. Kol hecha dika trei lekuchen, di bay nasiv hai, sharia. Biloi tavayo asirin. You know what v'lakcha is teaching me? That you have to be able to take 1 out of 2. And if you can't take 1 out of 2, either one, then you can't take any of them. Now, what would that case be? We can't take either one because one of them is a relative. One of them is his wife's sister. So then velakcha doesn't apply over there. You can't take the other one. Velakcha means you take one where you could have taken both.
No. But both are permitted.
Where both are permitted, right?
So if Shimon and Shimon were married to two different women, not sisters, and then Levi and Yehuda, he could have chosen either one of them.
Yeah. And he
Because
probably
they're
could do
sisters,
both.
Right. Because they're sisters.
Because it's
so you
sister.
can't take one, so you can't take it.
Yeah, but it's saying more than that. It's saying that Reuven, remember, had another wife, Sarah. So forget about the Shimon over here. Forget about the Levi. Let's say it's just Shimon. Reuven has a wife, Leah and Sarah. And Shimon has a wife, Rachel. Rachel and Leah are sisters. So even though Shimon is not allowed to marry Leah clearly, because that's his wife's sister, but he's also not allowed to marry Sarah because he didn't have an option of taking one or the other. Balakha would mean he would only be able to marry Sarah if he could have married Leah. An option call?
In Inca Peru, the requirement was that the brother had to marry among the Inca family.
Oh, really?
Required. So I wonder if they had these kind of questions.
What is the rule? What was the
The
rule?
brothers always marry the sisters. That's how you maintain the power in that family.
Oh, they would marry their own
Yeah,
sisters.
no sisters.
Oh,
But if
that
one
was like
died-
by the pharaohs and all of that. They did
Yeah,
that.
they also did that.
Yeah, that's like the
Isn't-
historical. Sorry, that's
Isn't
the.
contradictory?
Go ahead.
Isn't contradictory that he wouldn't be able to marry either one if the whole point of the Yibum is that he should be able to sow the seed of his brother?
Yeah,
Then by not marrying any of them, it's like an all or nothing type situation. It's contradictory to what the entire Yibum concept is all about.
right. I don't have an answer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I understand the basic logic is that how Yibam is supposed to work. That to lahakim shemachiv, to continue the line of his brother. Yeah, but the exceptions make it complicated because the logic doesn't fit always with those exceptions. Okay. Now the Gemara says, 1 second. So let's finish off. Rebbe says, "Be like Tavayas Asirin. If you can't marry both of them, then if you can't marry either of them, then they're both prohibited." The Yevama b'makim yibam huda asira tzara shlei b'makim yibam shayit tzara. When it says v'yibma, not v'yibama, v'yibma, the v'yibma, and he will do yibam on her, v'yibma. So that tells me that when is this a problem? That's only if it's b'makim mitzvah. It's in a case of yibam. If it's not a case of yibam, then he's allowed to marry the tzara. The Gemara says for Rabbanan, the Rabbanan that don't learn like Rebbe, they learned from Aleha. They have other sources to this. So what do they do with this pasuk of Vilakha and V'yivma? They use it for Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. It was early Amir in Eretz Yisrael. The Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina Vilakha malamet shemegar shebeget the machzira v'yivma al karcha. Very interesting halachas. What happens if he does yibam and then he wants to divorce her? Does he have to do chalitza? It says no. He just gives her a regular get. Let's say he wants to marry her again. The mitzvah of yibam is already performed. Can he then remarry her? It says yes, he could remarry her. And the Yibma, the pasuk of the Yibma tells me that if he lives with her against her will, they're married.
Wow.
Yeah, it's even al balkarcha. Usually a marriage, yeah. Usually marriage has to be with her consent, but this would be they would be married even without her consent. Okay.
Didn't we learn like the rights of that marriage has to be with consent?
Yeah. Except by Yibam.
Except in
Yeah.
But we also learned that if he has boils or something, skin disease, or
Tell me
then-
again.
if the brother who's gonna marry her has skin problems.
Oh yeah, we
or
learned.
something.
We learned. Oh, so that's a problem. We learned that that she can choose. We don't close her mouth. She can choose chalitza. She has the. However, if she didn't, and he forced her before there was that discussion, so then the marriage would take place. Yeah. Yeah. It says you don't muzzle her, right? That was connected to the smichas. Okay. The Rebbe, how does Rebbe know these very important halachas? He used velakach and velakcha to teach me that that you can't marry the tzara, the co-wife. You can't do yibam on the co-wife. How does he know the Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina that he can divorce her and remarry her? The Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina mila isha nafka. He learns it from the word isha. Velakcha leila isha. And where does he know al karcha? Mi Yevama yava yaleh nafka. He learns it from Yevama yava yaleh. Rebbe hay aleh mayavadlei. What does Rebbe do with aleha? Going back to our aleha that we had before, which he doesn't use. He uses it for the following. Yeah, this is going to be a little way out. Nothing that we've been discussing. It says like this: Ein chayavim bezin ela al davar shezadayne kares v'shegagase chatas v'cheina mashiach. V'lei ba'avedus kechavim ela al davar shachayavim al zadayne kares v'shegagase chatas. Okay, we're talking about 3 types of karbanos. It's very relevant because it's in the parsha. If a bezdin makes a mistake, the Sanhedrin makes a mistake, and they make a wrong psak, and people follow that, they have to bring a karban. It's called a par helem davar shel tzibar. But what type of mistake would that be? It's only something that would have been that's a punishment of kares, and they made a mistake about such a type of sin, and they have permitted it. And if it's a shaygig, you have to bring a chatas. They end up bringing a par. They end up bringing the par helem davar. They bring a cow, a bull. Now, the same thing applies with a kayin HaMashiach, a kayin gadol. He also makes a mistake. So what type of mistake would require that special karban? What's it called? What's the par kayin HaMashiach? It's called that bull of the kayin gadol. That's only if the mistake was in a davar shechayavan of kares shegase chatas. And the same thing applies. There's a special karban if avodah zara, if there's a mistake in the psak of what avodah zara they're allowed to do if they serve avodah zara. Only if the type of service was done on something that would have been chatas, would have been a kares b'mezid and b'shegeg chatas. Otherwise, what other types of avodah zara are there? If the service that he did was not bowing down or offering incense or something like that, instead he just hugged the avodah zara or kissed the avodah zara, that would not be a chiyuv kares. It's prohibited, but it's not a kares. Utanan nami was also taught in the Mishnah. Kol mitzvah shebeteir shechayavan al sedayne kares val shegagase chatas. Anything in the Torah that is b'mezid it's kares, b'shegeg it's a chatas. In that case, yachid, we didn't mention the regular chatas. We didn't mention the regular. We only mentioned the strange ones. Yachid maybe kisvei sira. The yachid brings a female lamb or goat. The nasi, if it's a king, maybe sar, he brings a goat, male goat. Mashiach u bezdin, if it's a kain gadol or if it's the bezdin that made the mistake, maybe in par. U'ba'avedus kechavim, if it's in avodah zara, then Yachid, Nasi, Umashiach, all of them, if it's an individual, if it's a king, or if it's Kain Gadol, maybe Seira, the female goat. In Tzibur, if it's a community that's in, then maybe in Parvasar. They have to bring 2. They have to bring a bull and a male goat, Par la'ola v'sar l'chatas. Par is a burnt offering and the sar is l'chatas. let's leave it over here. Okay. Have a easy fast, everyone. Freilich and Purim. We'll learn tomorrow morning.